Welcome everyone to the first spotlight session of TLC. Everyone wins continuous improvement in the classroom. My name is Haley Sampson, and I'm pleased to introduce our speakers and moderator today. And you have come to a spotlight session that's anything but ordinary. We're here to talk about or ask ourselves, really, what if every academic experience, regardless of format, instructor, or discipline, was intentionally designed to improve over time? In this session, we will be offered insights into how continuous improvement as a model can create space for innovation, reduce administrative burden, and foster a culture where everyone wins. We will unpack what continuous improvement, known as CI, is, why it matters, and how it differs from other improvement areas through a discussion of practical applications. So whether you are a faculty member striving for more impactful instruction, an instructional designer seeking scalable innovation, or an administrator aiming to streamline systems, or even a student support professional advocating for equity and excellence, you are in the right place. I'm pleased to introduce you to our speakers and moderator today. Dr. Bill Balzer is Vice President Emeritus of Faculty Affairs and Strategic Initiatives and Professor of Industrial Organizational Psychology at Bowling Green State University. With over 35 years of experience in higher education, he has held leadership roles, including Department Chair, Dean, and Interim College President. He is the author of Lean Higher Education, Increasing the Value and Performance of University Processes, now in its second edition. And also he is the co-editor of Hoshin Kanri in Higher Education. He is a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt, and Dr. Balzer is a pioneer in applying lean principles to academic environments and has advised institutions across the U.S. on strategic planning and process improvement. Dr. Balzer, we're so glad you're here with us today.
Thank you.
Next, we have Professor Vincent Wiegel, who is a professor of lean and world-class performance at Han University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. He leads the research group for lean and world-class performance, where he conducts applied research on lean in education, healthcare, manufacturing, and service industries. Dr. Wiegel is the author of Lean in the Classroom, a groundbreaking book that integrates lean philosophy with pedagogy to improve student outcomes and institutional efficiency. With a background in both economics and philosophy, he brings a unique interdisciplinary lens to lean education and has worked with organizations ranging from SMEs to multinationals. And ensuring that the faculty voice is in the room, we have Dr. Darla Branda, who joined the University of Arizona Global Campus in 2022 and serves the institution as the program director and lead faculty for the Bachelor of Science in Health Information Management program. Dr. Branda holds a Doctor of Education in Organizational Leadership and has dedicated her life's work to educating health information management students for over 25 years and leading health information management programs for 8 years. Her research interests focus on professional practice experiences and preceptor training, and Dr. Branda has over 30 years of experience in the health information management profession. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you,
let's
Brad.
begin to explore with our thought experiment here with our question. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Balzer.
Great. Can you switch to the next slide, I think?
Yes.
Oops, maybe the one after that even. So the question that we posted, and I hope some people were giving thought to it during the very kind introductions, is an issue that was raised by one of our colleagues, Bob Emiliani, one of the pioneers in continuous improvement in higher education. And Bob had asked lots of classes, and his colleagues asked lots of classes of students, who are the faculty? Who are the faculty that really had an impact on you, your education, your success after college? And what typically happens is students or alumni say the names of 3 or 4 faculty members. That's it. Now, thinking about a more traditional university with an undergraduate program, or undergraduate degree that has about 120 credit hours, that's pretty typical. It's usually about 40 courses. So a student will have 40 courses, and at the end of those 40 courses, identify 3 or 4 faculty members of having a significant impact on them. That's the 10% problem. 4 out of 40, 10%. The other 90% may have had some impact, may have not had much of an impact. So what is it about the 10%? Why only 10%? So what we're trying to do is think about, how do we move that needle? How do we move that 10% up to 15% or 20%? Or 40% or 50%, so that when a student graduates, and then you hear from that student at the end of the degree or down the road, they're not just identifying 3 or 4 of the faculty members of their program or their course of study, but actually a lot more. There's riches of faculty members who had an impact on them. So wouldn't this be great for students if they could say, I took 40 courses and 25 of those faculty hit it out of the park. They were terrific. It was the best undergraduate experience I could have. And wouldn't it be great for us as teachers to know that we're being seen by our students as having that significant positive impact, not just on their education while they're with us at our university, but afterwards. They took it with them, and they saw the benefit of what we did. And wouldn't it be great for our universities to be able to say, so many of our students have identified so many of our faculty as having a real impact on them. We are really living up to our teaching and learning mission at our university. So that's what we want to really do with our work, that Vincent and I are going to be talking about, is how do we get from that 10% to a much higher number? We think continuous improvement is the way to get there. And I'd like to turn it over to Vincent now and walk us through a little bit about what continuous improvement is through our lens. Vincent.
Yes, thank you, Bill. And thank you again, Haley, for having us. When it comes to continuous improvement, for me, the absolute essential thing is actually me considering myself a student of my students' learning, that is. So for me, the whole continuous improvement and the 4 steps that we will be discussing boils down to me trying to better study and understand the learning of my students, so that in turn I can help them be better students. And that consists basically of 4 rather simple questions, and as it usually happens, those simple questions turn out to be rather hard ones. The first one is, what's going on? So is learning actually taking place? Do the students actually learn? How can I evidence that that learning is taking place? And learning to me, and here it comes also down to your view on education, is not just passing an exam, which to me is an important indicator, important aspect, but also points out to a limited understanding of what learning is. It's the ability to reproduce the right information at the right moment. But what you would really want to see happen is that learning is integrated. So what is the evidence that that is happening? That is the first step. What is going on? Is learning taking place? Then from that understanding on, you will see that some learning is taking place, and often quite a lot. I would think that generally we do a proper job, and often a good job. So there's learning taking place, but as it goes, you want to also understand why that learning did happen, and at the instances where it didn't, what hampered the learning. And that is something that requires a bit more effort and thought. And for me, the key here is to assessing what is going on without judgment. So as, say, a scientist, just observe what's happening, being non-judgmental with regard to my students, whatever reason might have prevented them from learning. It was, I like to think, not intentional, and it definitely was not to irk me. But there was something that stood in the way of them learning as much as they would have liked to and could have. And it's for me, together with my students, to understand why it didn't happen. And when it does happen, what are the good practices that I should consciously keep promoting or even extending? So, and that is not something that I do in isolation. I do that together, and Bill and I feel that is something that as educators we should be doing with our students together. And here one of the challenges, and we might be talking about this a little more extensively later on, is that we're often so pressed for time. We have such a full load of materials that we would like to teach that we haven't got the time to find out whether our teaching is actually effective. So I would often say that if I'm doing half of what I intended to teach, I'm probably teaching too much. And with our crammed curricula, that is of course a challenging thing, and that's the whole lean philosophy that's underlying this. If I just keep pushing a lot of information and a lot of content to my students, and they haven't got the capacity to process it all, it is for naught. So that is what happens in step 2. And then based on the input that I collect, based on the insights that not just I, but my students as well share, then comes up to question number 3, what should we be doing to promote the learning? And that is often, and that's a key point that Bill and I are trying to get across, not a wholesale revamp of the curriculum or the class. It is often tiny little things that do make a difference. And if I can do so every week or every day of my teaching, just a little over the whole period of a course, I will have made some substantial improvements. So rather than thinking big, it's like, well, think big, but act small, do small steps at a time, and be, most of all, ambitious for our students and help them reach those ambitions. And then after we've implemented an improvement, or implemented what we think will be an improvement, which is an essential difference, we also need to check whether it actually did happen. So before actually coming up with, well, I might reorganize my slides, or I might introduce a different format for my exercises, it requires us also to think about, how will I know whether this improvement has actually succeeded? So before doing the improvement, I want to spend some time thinking about, how am I going to test whether the improvement was effective? So the 4th question, did it work, ties nicely and closely into the first one, what's going on, and us being prepared and thinking on how to do that. For me, this all began ages ago when I was teaching at some point a class, and I was working quite hard. And I'm sure you will have had this experience at some point. I wasn't coming across. I didn't know what I was doing, but it wasn't working, that was for sure. And rather than being annoyed with my students or myself, I just asked them, I got this feeling, is that feeling correct? I engaged in a discussion with them. And then bit by bit, we tried to untangle what was actually happening. And then I started thinking, okay, so given that what the students shared with me, I should start doing things differently. But then came the realization that just this hunch that I had was not a very scientific one, not a very reliable one. I mean, gut feel will get you a long way, but there's limitations to that. So I should go about this more structurally and not just at the end of my course, because by then it is too late, actually. I mean, the learning will have taken place or not, as it happens. So I should be doing this from the very first day to be in line with what's happening and grow and adjust to the group. And that is also by acknowledging that each time my group is a very diverse group. They will have different ambitions, different needs, different preferred styles of studying, and I should try to cater as much as possible to their needs. Well, and that's obviously difficult. I mean, the experience that I was referring to included some 90 students in the college hall. I mean, or in the classroom. That was not an easy thing to say, okay, I'll tune into each and every one of those 90 students. But at least my ambition was to get as close as possible. And it took me, and it still takes me, continuous experiments and improvements and trying to get closer each time. So that is what, in our thinking, I mean, this is Bill and mine's views on what constitute continuous improvement. And perhaps, Bill, you'd like to add some from your experience or view?
Yeah, I'll just say that, the four very simple questions that are asked there are really the basis of scientific thinking. And that most of us who've been trained as either applied scientists or basic scientists, or just have a little bit of, research methods experience, these are the steps that we would use to solve a problem. So we're just trying to take these four steps that faculty are generally familiar with and say, let's not just use it for your scholarship, let's use it for your teaching and learning understanding as well. So we both subscribe to this as a very basic problem solving approach. And if we can get everybody to use this same routine or pattern of questions when dealing with issues in the classroom, we'd all be able to communicate better and we'd all be able to do better problem solving. And, as Haley said earlier, I was a university administrator for many years. And while these four steps are part of the problem solving approach, we didn't always do those steps, or maybe do those steps in that order. So it might be an problem, what's going on? And rather than really deeply understanding the problem, we might say, what should you do? Well, somebody will say, well, let's just do this. So we'll come up with a solution, even though we don't truly understand the root cause or the primary cause of what the problem may have been. And I guess more often than not, we really didn't go back and do a deep dive into, did it work? There was maybe an assumption because we all thought it was a good idea, or somebody thought it was a good idea, that it probably worked, when in fact we never really went back and studied it. So, we know this is a very simple model, and it may look too simplistic, but these are the basic steps of scientific thinking and problem solving. And if we all did them in this order in the classroom, we just took it upon ourselves to do it in the classroom, we could really use it to improve teaching and learning.
Thank you both for that overview of continuous improvement. And I'm excited to get started into our interview, or our Q&A with you both. And we do have some questions and comments coming into the chat. But Darla, could I turn things over to you to kick us off, and I'll keep watching the chat?
Sure. Why don't you, because I think the panelists would probably really love to hear the chat questions too. So if this starts to go into too much time, maybe you could just let me know and we can switch over to the chat questions. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all both so much. I love this topic because in my work background, I worked in quality improvement for a while in the healthcare organization. So this stuff is I love talking about it. I could talk about it all day long. So tell us a little bit about the presentation. The title suggests there are wins. And so can you talk about who wins and what that looks like?
Yeah, let me start with it, Vincent, and then I'll turn it over to
Sure.
you. I mean, in the type of continuous improvement that we subscribe to, it's called lean, but which is kind of one brand of continuous improvement. It's that an improvement isn't an improvement if it's not good for everyone. That is, if an improvement is just good for the teacher and not good for the students, that would not be considered a good solution to a problem. Or if it's just good for the administration, but not as good for the students or the faculty members, that would not be the kind of improvement that we would see as a continuous positive improvement. So when we say we think it's going to be good for everyone, we mean all the constituencies in higher education. That is, it's going to be great. It's going to be better for the students. They're going to have a better learning experience. They're going to have better learning outcomes from the class that they took, or the course that they took, or the degree that they received. They might have better opportunities on graduation because they're better prepared in the labor market. So it's got to be good for students. It's going to be good for faculty members too, because faculty members will be able to spend less time dealing with the extra work that's created by the shortcomings in their classroom due to course design issues, course delivery issues, course assessment issues. So by understanding and digging into where they might make these micro improvements or maybe more larger improvements, they can free up some of their time that they don't need to spend on issues if they could fix them. It's also greater satisfaction and pride, again, being part of that in that 10% as well as a faculty member. It's good for faculty administrators. The faculty are more self-directed, they're more engaged in their teaching and learning, they're motivated, and the kinds of work that an administrator really takes great pride in is having really motivated faculty members. The faculty members are really taking that responsibility on in a continuous improvement environment. So it's good for administrators too. Employers have better access to better skilled, better prepared students that come out of the university. So it's good for employers. The degrees or the programs or the badges or whatever you're using, those are more aligned with the immediate needs of the workplace. Again, continuously improved to meet the needs of the employer. The institution benefits from a better reputation of the teaching faculty and the quality of their academic programs, directly by course completion and success, and indirectly by improvements in student enrollment, student retention, and graduation. So again, we want all of these to come together in a continuous improvement outcome. Vincent, anything that?
Yes, and the way you describe it, Bill, is really about kicking off the virtuous cycle by improving at some point and knowing that all these stakes are interconnected and focusing on the value that we deliver. And the things that bug me at times are often the same things that do not add value and keep me from spending more time with my students. And if I get to spend a bit more time with my students, the success ratio will increase, which again frees up me from having to do re-examinations and remedial teaching or stuff like that, which again, and like Bill pointed out, that again is good for the institution, foremost for the students, of course, but also for the employers. So kicking off the virtuous cycle, and let me stress that again, it doesn't take a grand redesign of everything. It is getting those tiny things and reinvesting them and freeing up the time that is what we're looking for.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that. There are a lot of faculty in the room, I believe. And so this is a question specifically for faculty, and you kind of touched on it, but I wanted to go a little bit deeper because it's something that I definitely struggle with, and I don't think I'm alone with it. And that is time, faculty time. And so if a faculty member really was intrigued by this and wanted to get started to enhance their teaching and help improve student learning outcomes and such, how would you advise that faculty member? And I think Vincent really touched on something I thought was interesting, is that the time you invest, you might actually reap more time because you were no longer having to do as much remedial work or redos on exams and things like that. So if you could just talk about how a faculty member could get started and work within the time constraints and how that might actually give them more time back in their day.
Vincent, why don't you start with that one?
Okay, yeah, and I will start off with something that might sound a bit controversial. I mean, if you are on a very tight schedule and it's a huge load, then if you want to get started, you've only got a few options, logically speaking. You either work more time or you do less. Given that we are already fully booked and crammed, that is often not a sustainable option. Sometimes it is if you can find that time. But the other only, and I mean, this sounds like the French would say contre-cœur. It goes straight against the grain, against your heart and your commitment. But doing somewhat less is actually the answer. And that might feel scary because we've got the curriculum fully and there's all these topics that we need to teach. My point would be, don't. Skip a few, then you might miss, and the students might miss a few topics, but if you keep on everything and it's you kind of pushing the content while the students are not prepared to receive that content, all your pushing will have been in vain anyhow. So cutting back slightly to become more effective on the stuff that you actually do is a very good beginning. And here is the very hard part, and like Bill said, these questions are actually kind of simple and this advice is absolutely logical, but it goes against the grain and our ingrained view. But so probably getting started, and that's why I like your question a lot, Darla, is the hardest thing you probably do. But once you get going, you will find that you free up so much time and energy that actually there's plenty of time to get back to the stuff that you want to discuss. And also to experiment in different pedagogical interventions that might help you improve even further. So, and if I just might add to that, probably the most important skill that I can teach my students at least is metacognition. So developing the metacognitive skill set for the students will make them active learners and actual active contributors. And if you can spend a little time on doing that, well, probably you're already spending a substantial time, but that would be the most fantastic step that you can actually make. Is that making sense?
And I would add in that, you know, while maybe focusing on fewer topics could be one possibility. The other is to look at things that we're doing in the classroom or in the class experience that just aren't working as well as we'd like. And you know, for example, in office hours, you know, I would hold office hours and students would come in and they didn't really have a good way of thinking through how to best use their time in an office hour. So they would leave office hours with probably less than they needed from me. And I would spend that office hour realizing I wasn't making a connection with the student or the right kinds of connection. So how can I use a continuous improvement model to say, what's going on? My office hours aren't very effective. You know, why did it happen? Well, the student isn't prepared to know how to best use me during office hours, or I'm not able, I don't have a good model for helping the student figure out, you know, what's happening to them, and then say, okay, what do we do? You know, what should you do? And we put in some solutions in place. So as an example for me, I would use a model like it's called, I called it AMDO. Is it the student's ability? Is it their motivation? Is it their directedness? Is it their opportunity? Which of those are causing them to not be successful in the classroom? If it's an ability issue, I know a way, I know a lot of things I can do to help fix an ability issue. If it's an opportunity issue, they're working full time, they have kids to take care of. I've got to figure out, how do I help them resolve that opportunity? So they can spend less time, um, uh, and be successful. I can spend less time and be successful, and then I can invest that time that I've saved in other areas. So it's doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, but just doing it more effectively. So getting a faculty member started, Doral, and maybe this is part of your question as well. Vincent and I are working on a book, Better Teaching and Better Learning, taking this continuous improvement and trying to bring it into the classroom from a faculty member's perspective. But if I was a faculty member wanting to get started on this, there are lots of people, university teaching support professionals who might have resources to point them to continuous improvement, or there might be colleagues or mentors in other departments. Dorothy mentioned you have a background in quality. You'd be a perfect person to mentor a faculty member saying, like, hey, how could I use continuous improvement in my classroom? Can you help me get started? There's professional organizations, create a brown bag or a book club with some other people who are thinking about doing this and just work together. And just start applying your own scientific thinking method to the classroom. And again, just saying, like, what's the problem? Why is it a problem? How do I fix it? And did I fix it? And you're started. You're doing continuous improvement in your classroom. What you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to do it, completely by yourself.
I love the simplicity. Sometimes we make things more complicated than they have to be. And one thing that really struck me when both of you were talking was, I feel like at the heart of a lot of this is really the importance of knowing our students, because we have students in our classes that might come in with a lot of work experience that's related to the topic. We might have some that are brand new. I have a student right now who's probably older than me, and she's having her daughter help her with all the tech aspects of being in an online class, like uploading files. That's really challenging. So there's all these things that are happening, and trying to make sure we're meeting the needs of all our students. To me, that's always been one of the biggest challenges, just because there's so many unique needs going on in the classroom. But thanks for that. That was really, really great information. So the next question is, if continuous improvement is a newer approach to improving teaching and learning, is there any evidence that supports that it works? And I added this part, is what types of data would you collect, and how would you evaluate the efficacy of the improvements? And I think you touched on a little bit earlier, but if you want to go into more detail.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with this one, Vincent, and then backfill. Thanks. Continuous improvement has been used everywhere in every sector of business and industry, including education. So continuous improvement is out there. Interestingly, though, it hasn't been used a lot that we can find in teaching and learning to actually bring it in the classroom. So we can talk later more if we want about how it's used in many other parts of higher education settings, like student admissions and finance and whatnot. But we didn't see a lot of it happening in the classroom. And as Vincent and I became very passionate about this, the classroom or teaching and learning is the most important thing that happens at a university. It's not what happens in the finance area. It's what happens, in the coursework that we deliver to these students. So we found 14 publications or presentations that actually have used continuous improvement in the classroom. They've used it in a single course. A faculty member says, I want to do this in my course. I don't need to ask anybody else's permission. I'm just going to do it. It was an online executive MBA course. One of the things it was actually team taught. So what these two faculty members did was, at the end of every session period, they'd say, we're going to set aside 3 minutes and we want an end of class survey. Tell us what we could improve in the class. So it wasn't the end of course survey where you say, oh gosh, I wish I would have been doing that for 14 weeks if I knew about it earlier. It was after week 1, and the two faculty members said, we're going to make, as Vincent said earlier, I'm going to make an immediate change now. In week 2, going forward for the class. They would do that in every class. And they made changes, for example, with balancing weekly time commitments. Some weeks had a lot more readings or expectations from a student. And for working professionals, that's really hard. So they said, what we can do is we can just balance it out to make the workloads very similar across, this was a 15-week semester, and, balance that out. Or students were unsure about how to, what was going to be on the exam and how to do well on the exams. I said, well, let's come up with a good grading rubric and share that with the students so they know what's going on ahead of time. And I know already at your university, UAGC, you have a lot of these things in place already. So these are the kinds of things that can happen. An academic degree program, 10 courses taught by different faculty members. Oh, I should go back and say, and the benefits, improved learning in that course taught by the faculty members. The students were much more satisfied, and the time burden on the faculty members was a lot less because the students understood what they needed to do. They didn't need to hear from the faculty members over and over and over again. An academic degree program with 10 courses, use CI with all the faculty members of the program getting together and saying, like, how can, what are our learning outcomes? How are we delivering the courses? What are the things what's the classroom experience like? And they use CI in each of the 10 classes that's part of this degree program. And they had much better aligned student expectations. They had faculty members saying, like, oh, you give that reading assignment, I also give that reading assignment. Me too, me too, me too. So why is the student reading the same paper or article 5 times during a program so they could get rid of some of that and bring in new material? So they had a really better aligned student expectations as an outcome. And the faculty said, this stuff works and we're going to continue doing it. And then you can do it broader than that too, if you want. And over at University of Strathclyde in Scotland, they were looking at curriculum oversight failures, where courses weren't getting approved, or changes to courses weren't getting approved quickly enough, or actually improvements were being implemented even before they were approved, which is, as we know, in an accreditation area, kind of a no-no. So what they did was they looked at the entire curriculum review process and said, there's a problem, there's something that slows it down, there's some information we can give to the faculty members so they know exactly how to do this. And they, by doing that and flagging bottlenecks and so forth, they were able to have 100% reduction in late requests for changes, 100% reduction in requests that are returned for correction, and 55% reduction in staff time that was spent on the curriculum review process. So it works. It works in the academic sector in teaching and learning. It works if you do it individually. It works if you do it with your colleagues, and it works if it's done institution-wide as well. On the academic side of the house, we've been focusing on. So that's what we really want to explore in the book, is how to get more of that happening on the teaching and learning side of a university. Vincent, I'm sure I've left some stuff out.
No, I think for this purpose and for the question, that was the nail on the head. So I'd rather leave a bit time for other questions from the audience and adding to this.
Okay, Haley, would you like me to go to the chat questions now? I think you sent me one.
Yes, I will feed them to you because they're sort of interspersed throughout our
That
chat.
would be great because it's hard to find them.
Yes.
We have a lot of great questions. Everyone's very intrigued by this. Okay, so here we go. Here's the first question. I think this is a really great one. What is the step that most people get stuck on out of the 4 steps?
Yeah.
Vincent?
And I saw some of the answers in the chat coming along. It is actually, I would say, not one question. It's the whole set, but the first one, like I pointed out, evidencing that learning is taking place in another form than just, well, they passed the exam. That is one of the hardest. That is not to say that the other ones aren't hard either, but it's probably pedagogically speaking, philosophically speaking, one of the hardest actually to say, how do I know that we have achieved the development in their skill set, their knowledge, as a professional matured to the level that we aspired. That is probably the very hardest, but the other ones are equally hard nuts to crack.
Yeah, and I might add, it is a great question. I think part of it, I think could be the hardest part is that we've been raised to think, or maybe we have our own cognitive biases or self-protection biases to think that we really are doing a great job. And when we hear a concern or a complaint from a student, it, we might feel like we want to protect ourselves and say, well, that's just griping, or that student just doesn't want to work hard enough, or whatever. So that really isn't a problem that I have to worry about. That's a problem the student has to worry about. So I think one of the most important things that happens in a continuous improvement environment is that you're taught to surface problems. It's part of the role to say, if there is a problem, I need to identify it and then I can work on it. But if what I'm doing is pushing down problems because they make me look like maybe I'm not the best teacher I could be, or I really thought I did a good job there, and the students are telling me I didn't, so I feel badly about that or wounded by it. So I think part of it is getting openness to that first question. And then I want to go to the end too, is to say, I think the hard part too is that when we do something and it doesn't work, sometimes that frustrates us. That, did it work? No, it didn't. The students are still complaining. They're still not understanding this material. They're still, asking me to regrade their exam because of this or this. Is like saying, I give up. This isn't working. And I think it's that stick-to-itiveness of the continuous improvement. It's ongoing improvement. It's never-ending improvement. So if your solution didn't work, you try another solution. Make sure you truly understand the root cause of the problem, and you work at it, and you work at it, and you work at it. So to me, it's kind of on the front end and the back end. But all four steps are important. But I think both of those can be areas. Vincent?
Yeah, and like in some of the colleagues in the audience say, well, it's also hard to find out why did it happen, and Bill points out to some aspect like not being judgmental towards students, but also not being defensive. I mean, we all know we did a good job to the best of abilities. Sometimes we know we had an off day, but other than that, we're doing good. So there's no need to feel defensive. Sometimes things don't work out, and that's very human. That's human nature. So not being judgmental, neither towards your students nor towards yourself, but at adopting this curious, if you will, attitude and say, well, this doesn't happen. Hey, that's good news, because it's an opportunity to improve, rather than say, oh gosh, I didn't deliver. So that's, for me, it's part of why did it happen. And then there's all kinds of techniques like fish bones and 5-time why that will help you finding out. But it begins, I think, like Bill said, with that attitude. And then if what should you do? I mean, you will have a multitude of options, and there probably it's also, don't go and try look for the best option. Just make a small improvement, and if you do one tomorrow and the day after tomorrow again, you will get to all the important improvements in time. But if you have the feeling like I should optimize it and I should have the best one going out, then it becomes overwhelming, because there will be a multitude of options. So again, that is being perhaps it's hard questions, but it's also about being relaxed and perhaps not too hard on yourself. Just go and try it. Like Bill said, experiment. They might also fail, then go again. So that's in each of those 4 questions, 4 steps, if you will, that it's don't try to be complete or have the full picture. Go, do, try, learn, and go again.
Excellent. That just reminded me, I had flashbacks of my first year of teaching and all the really awful trials and errors. You know,
Yeah.
when they hand you the office keys and they're like, good luck.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, Darla. I mean, we're not being naive here. We know
Right.
there's a risk to, this feels like risky behavior, if you will. I mean, I've been on the administrative side where faculty, either as a chair or a dean or as a vice president or an interim president, where faculty are turning in teaching portfolios. And, you want it to look perfect, that everything went well in every class and every student loved me, when in fact, we were more impressed, some of my colleagues and I were more impressed by a faculty member who said, the first time I taught this course, I got this feedback. And it really was like something wasn't going right. So I solved the problem. I figured out what the problem was. I put in a solution, and the next time I taught the course, it was better. So that is exactly what we want faculty members to be doing, but on a continuous improvement, not at the end of a course, not just for their teaching portfolios, but it should just be part of their second nature, part of the routine that they use. And when they talk to other faculty members, they can talk about the routine and say, yeah, this is what's going on in my class. And then the other faculty member says, well, why did it happen? And you're going back and forth on this 4-step process, and that's how we know we've turned the corner. That we're using continuous improvement as part of the way we improve teaching and learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
If I
love
may,
that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, and if I may add some, it's also some concerns on how do you find the time. This is not just about us as faculty. Make your students co-improvers of the course. There's a lot that they can actually do, and I found over all those years that they're 99 out of 100 most happy to chip in and help out doing some of those improvements. So it's not just that I like to do the checkout. When I have given a lecture, I will ask the students, how was it? How are you? And ask them, what could we do better next time? And ask them, what can you do to help us all do better next time? So I don't view it as my sole responsibility to improve. It's really a group effort of all the students and the lecturers together to ensure that we get to better learning and teaching. So if you feel a bit cramped, just enlist your students and they will happily do so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. They're also happy to tell you what's not working. But I mean, if you take it in the light that it's meant, it can really be helpful in tackling maybe just one thing at a time instead of, I think a lot of us feel like we have to do it all at once, and maybe just breaking it down into one small step at a time instead of the entire course. I think that might go a long way. So we have a few more questions. Do we still have some time, Haley, for that?
We have time for maybe 2 more if we can save about 3 minutes for a little recap and closing things out. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Alrighty. Super. I think this next question is a really good one for lean perspective. So here's the question. How can continuous improvement be embedded into curriculum design without adding administrative burden for faculty and for the administrators too?
Bill, that's one for you.
Yeah, sure. I think what we would want to do is to create a team and a continuous improvement team, if it's curriculum review, that it's not just me, my course, but it's other people that are involved, want to put together a team and have the team look at what that process currently looks like, right? You know, what is going on now in our curriculum process, and then look at that process and again say, why did it happen? And you know, and maybe part of that, what's going on, I could add in, you know, where do we want to be? Do we want it to be faster? Do we want it to be more accurate? Do we want it to, you know, what are we trying to accomplish? Where do we want our curriculum review to be? Do we want to be able to change our curriculum annually? You know, what are we shooting for? And then, you know, look at the current process and say, you know, what's happening now and why is it happening that way? And together, the faculty say, well, this is a bottleneck for me. This is a step. You know, I've got to fill out this 15-page form when I want to make a curriculum change, and that just seems really burdensome. And say, okay, well, that may be an area for targeting for improvement. And then, you know, what should you do? So again, using these 4 steps is having together some administrators, some of the faculty members who teach, maybe an administrator, faculty administrator from the program, all working together to come up with a process that isn't going to be administratively burdensome, because that wouldn't be good for the faculty member. So that wouldn't be an improvement. You know, finding what works, and maybe it's small steps, or maybe sometimes you blow up a process and you know, start from scratch, you know, and rebuild it up. But you know, not doing it without having everybody in the room so they can say, yeah, that'll work for me, and it's not too burdensome for me, and there's a positive outcome for me. I win, you win, they win, kind of approach. Vincent?
Yep, I'm fully on board on that one.
Okay.
There was a comment coming along from, I think, Joanna on what to do when a project or assignment is coming up, and do you leave the door open with, and if you have a different idea of how you would like to present project, etc. And I really love that one, because ultimately, and that gets back to the point that Bill just also was making, it is also about the students demonstrating that they have achieved a certain level that they desire or need to attain. So that is a way in which you can free up some of the time by you originally designing all the projects, all the assignments, all the, well, the exercises. You turn to some extent the table by asking the students, how do you want to prove to me that you have learned what we set out to learn in this course? So show me the evidence, rather than this is the way I want you to demonstrate to me that, and on and on. So I think the question, and I probably feel a little suggestion there by Joanna, is an excellent one. And that is how that small question then turns into the bigger question that you just asked, Darla, and the answer by Bill.
Thank you, everyone. I think we might have time for one more quick question.
Okay. And here's the final question then. How effective is one-on-one coaching and mentoring for helping the faculty buy into continuous improvement?
Vincent, and I'll let you do it. And look, we need to give a short answer too, so we can. So I'll go to you, Vincent. You'll
Okay.
have a chance.
Yeah. I would say it is effective, but it depends. If we see the faculty, if we see ourselves as students as well, actually the same thinking applies. We each have our own different strategies of acquiring new skill sets and knowledge. So whether it's a one-on-one or a learning community in which, and I saw some of the vulnerability thread in the discussions going very, very powerful. It might be a group thing that allows you to onboard new colleagues in the continuous improvement. and share some of the stories like Bill just shared. So it can be effective, but it very much depends on the individual faculty that you're talking about.
Yeah, I just say you'd want that coach just that be someone who is a kind of a master of continuous improvement in some ways, so that you're getting the coaching from a continuous improvement perspective, not somebody who's, trying to be a good coach and telling you the answers, but a good continuous improvement coach will be asking you more questions so you learn how to find the answers yourself and you're developing your own continuous improvement skills.
I love that. Well, thank you all for this powerful discourse on continuous improvement. I would like to have you all share a few takeaways.
Vincent, do you want to do the takeaways or?
Yes, I will do them. The core message is faculty, we are often at the front line of that continuous improvement, and it's up to us to go and actually do it. It is a very powerful method, simple as it sounds, complex as it at times be, but it's grounded in the scientific approach that we're all familiar with. So it's not something alien or very disconnected that you will be learning. The 4 steps will all help us become students, be good students, become better learners, both as faculty and for the students itself. That standardized routine that CI is something that takes a bit of time to get ingrained. So at the beginning, use it consciously, even in a very formatted way, that will help you standardize your learning. And once you get that going, it will benefit everyone in the educational sector. So both the students, yourself as well, and it's an important factor, employers, the institution. So everyone stands to gain from initiating this virtuous cycle. And that is something, just go and do it.
You can change your classroom. You don't need permission from anybody. I mean, there are parameters, you can't turn a psychology course into a philosophy course, but you have a lot of opportunity to do continuous improvement in your classroom. You don't have to wait for the culture. You don't have to wait for leadership. You can do it. Now, if the culture moves to CI and leadership moves to CI, then we're one big, happy, continuous improvement family. That's even better. We would certainly like that, but you don't have to wait for it. Start doing it today.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Balzer and Dr. Wiegel, for your time and expertise today. Dr. Branda, thank you so much for facilitating this conversation. And I would be remiss if I did not thank Marie Henderson, our director in the delivery unit, for her service on the TLC steering committee, which led us to the connection to Bill and then to Vincent. So Marie, your support resulted in this excellent discourse. Much appreciated. Thank you to the attendees for your participation in today's session. Please use the survey link in the chat to nominate this TLC to provide feedback on this session. And also, Dr. Balzer has been generous with his time, and tomorrow we'll be joining Dr. Naughton's spotlight session on creating a learning plan versus a strategic plan. That will be first thing in the morning tomorrow for some additional discourse on continuous improvement. So I have placed that link for the feedback in the session. And thank you again, everyone, for your participation here. This was an excellent session.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
Have a great conference. Thanks for letting us be part of it.